Life as a Pac-12 fan has never been easy, and entering into the 2010s era, life has only gotten worse. Whether it was the creation of the Pac-12 Network by Commissioner Larry Scott, or the lack of a true championship team in the playoff era, the Pac-12 has steadily declined in relevance. Take a journey with us. Step into our shoes as we explain to you why the Pac-12 is failing to compete with the other Power 5 conferences.
The creation of the Pac-12 network in 2012 seemed like a good idea on paper. However, not signing with a major partner like Fox or ESPN doesn't compel satellite companies to pick up the network. As a result, Pac-12 network's audience is diminished to only 18 million homes nationwide. This means that the Pac-12 cannot put nearly as much money into athletics, leaving a large resource gap between it and the other Power 5 schools. Because so few people have access to Pac-12 games during prime time, the conference has become very weak and has drawn in less fans and recruits. For example, this past year, Oklahoma was scheduled to play UCLA at the Rose Bowl, and what should have been a huge out-of-conference game with a massive sold-out crowd ended up being a blowout. Hardly anyone showed up to the game, and it really highlights how no one cares about the Pac-12 nowadays.
Long has recruiting been the source of greatness in college football, and the Pac-12 has significantly fallen behind. The West Coast is a very lucrative place for a college athlete to play, and there are a ton of great cities, campuses, and areas to choose from. Despite this, highly ranked high school recruits time and time again opt to choose schools further east because of the things we have previously mentioned. On top of this, the Pac-12 simply spends less money on recruiting than other Power 5 conferences. For example, in 2020, Georgia spent $3.7 million on recruiting, while the best class from the Pac-12, Oregon, spent only $997,000. And according to many experts, this gap will only get wider, not to mention the loss of revenue that will come due to COVID-19. Perhaps the biggest reason recruits are shying away from the Pac-12 schools is simply the lack of playoff wins and appearances in the last 5 years.
Everything that we've talked about up until this point has created a quite significant skill gap between the Pac-12 and the other Power 5 conferences. Time and time again, the Pac-12 has been bested by out-of-conference opponents. Take, for example, the 2016 playoff game between Washington and Alabama, where they were stomped by Alabama 24-7. Or take 2015 Oregon, who was demolished by Ohio State's third-string quarterback and lost 42-20. Ohio State had more resources and talent available to them than Oregon, and it just showed for all 4 quarters. The Pac-12 needed to seize these opportunities early in the playoff era in order to close the already widening skill gap for the future. However, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and that leaves us with games like Alabama versus USC in 2016. There is a small amount of hope for the conference in the future. If the Pac-12 is able to win out-of-conference games like Oregon versus Ohio State, or even Oregon versus North Dakota State to a lesser extent, and USC versus Alabama, then it'll bring a significant amount of clout to the conference. Winning against 2 heavyweight opponents like these would boost the name recognition of the Pac-12 and would establish those teams as real national championship contenders. That is, if Oregon or USC doesn't get upset by interconference schlubs, which seems to happen quite often in the Pac-12. Oregon versus ASU. Alright, so a quick update. Last week, the Pac-12, following the Big Ten, announced that it would be canceling all out-of-conference games. So this small amount of hope that we had was essentially crushed, and now it's looking like a 2020 college football season may not even be coming. But that's a topic for a different day.
Hope is a hard thing to come by for us Pac-12 fans, and the future looks as bright as the night sky. One thing Pac-12 fans can hope for is a good TV deal in 2024, but for now, we can only pray that the cycle is broken next year.